Welcome to the Biz Gone Social podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are on the Biz Gone Social podcast, and I am so glad to be here. And my promise to you, as always, I want to just give you a little bit of verbal caffeine that's just going to jumpstart your business and help you stay social. And really, it's because don't you want to be the business that everyone's talking about? I know I do. And I am just so stoked to have today Kevin Palmieri with me. Welcome, Kevin.
Lorraine, thank you so very much for having me. I got to keep up with your energy to bring the verbal caffeine. That will be my goal today.
Absolutely. And really, it is all about energy. You know, energy about how much you have in your business, energy about how much you put out. And so could you tell my audience a little bit about what you do and how you serve people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the CFO, the founder, and the host of Next Level University. We're a global top 100 podcast. We just recorded our 1345th episode or something today. So believe it or not, the podcast is a very large part of our business because below that, we do one-on-one coaching and group coaching and a bunch of other things. So the podcast, to your point, has allowed us to create content and then be very social with our amazing, amazing community.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's like, I have a podcast too, as you know, because you're on my podcast, but it's like, I never realized how much, first of all, I just really enjoy meeting the people that I'm interviewing. So it's like, this has been really fun and I always learn something. So I'm excited to learn something. How did you get involved? You seem like you have a story, a side story. So how did you morph into this?
Yeah, for me, I didn't go to college because I knew I didn't want to do that. I had no idea, Lorraine, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I can't suggest to you that I planned on being where I am, but I did know I didn't want to go sit in a classroom for another 4 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I had a bunch of odd jobs. I was a personal trainer. I was in construction. I did a bunch of stuff. Eventually, I got an opportunity in an industry called weatherization. All that means is we would go into large buildings and make them more energy efficient. That was my job in a nutshell. Since I was working on state and or government buildings, I made anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour. At the time, I was thinking to myself, ooh, I am crushing it, and this is it. This is going to be it for me. I ended up making $100,000 at 26, but that required me to travel for 10 months out of the year. So I just lived in hotels pretty much every single week. I stayed up all hours of the night. I would drive across the country. It was a lot of work. And when I got to the end of that year, I realized that I did not want to do the same thing that I had to do in order to make that money again. And I realized that I kind of lived unconsciously. I didn't really know why I was doing what I was doing. So I said, look, I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to call it the Hyperconscious Podcast. That's the opposite of unconscious. I want to be hyperconscious. So I started a podcast. I fell in love with it. I fell out of love with my job because I didn't want to do what it took. So I put more time, energy, and effort into podcasting. And eventually I had a rock bottom basement moment where I was so miserable at my job and my mental health took a turn and I felt stuck and I felt trapped that I had a pretty heavy bout of suicidal ideations where I thought to myself, look, if I'm not here anymore, I don't have to deal with any of this BS. After that, I ended up leaving my job and going full time into what we're doing today. And that was in 2018. So that was almost 6 years ago now.
That's awesome. And, you know, to be able to, a lot of people, you know, they get stuck in that job that really isn't bringing them any joy, or, you know, it's just because they have a lot of responsibility and they have to make that amount of money. And people always laugh at me because, you know, I love what I do and I love what you're doing. And I feel like sometimes it's like, I still say it. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And, you know, I'm in my 60s now. So it's like, you know what? If I rediscover another area in my life that I'm going to do, I'm definitely going to do it because life's too short, you know, and we see that all the time. I love what you're doing. Now, you tell me more about this I saw on your website, really, when I glimpsed at it really briefly, you have some kind of university. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And
So
why you started it.
Yeah, our podcast is called The Next Level University. And when we were trying to figure out, like, what is this going to be? What is this going to end up being? We said, well, we want to teach people. We want to be the mentors that we didn't necessarily have. We want to be the positive male role models that we didn't have. My business partner and I both grew up without fathers. And we said, well, what do we say all the time? Well, we say next level. That pizza was next level. That workout was next level. All right, let's hang on to that. What can we throw in there that suggests we're going to teach you something? And it was university. So we do an episode every single day. So we do 7 episodes a week. And it's a whole thing. But underneath that, how we kind of connect that to university is we're in the process of creating a lot of online courses where we'll have a virtual building that is health. So you can go to learn about mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health. We'll have a virtual building on our virtual campus that's wealth. So learn about money, how to make more, invest, spend less. And then we'll also have one for love, where it's self-love and focused on intimate and or family relationships. We'll have one of those. So for us, it's kind of twofold. It's the name of the podcast and the name of the business, but it also allows us to kind of expand on that in a virtual campus that is it's in progress as we speak.
Sounds exciting. You know, I'm just like really so like, how do I put it? Enamored with you about like all those episodes and doing an episode every day. Cause I know what it takes for me to put out an episode once a week. And, you know, I feel like I'm ahead of the game because I'm scheduled all the way into July now. And I'm like really excited. But, you know, I've learned a lot through doing my few hundred podcasts, but like, what have you learned from recording all these podcasts?
2 things, 2 really big things. One, from day to day, progress is invisible. From year to year, progress is impossible to miss. I recorded a bunch of episodes yesterday and I recorded a bunch today. I am no better today than I was yesterday. And if I am, it's so marginal where I can't even recognize it. But when I go back, Lorraine, and I look at episode number 100, my goodness, it is brutal. It is brutal to look back. So that's part 1. I would say the second thing I've learned is, and again, it's kind of a similar thing. Today doesn't matter, but it also matters more than anything. So tomorrow I'll have another opportunity to do another episode. So if this one goes horribly wrong, at least tomorrow I have an opportunity to get back on the horse. It's allowed me to stay humble based on the goals we have, but also hopeful in the fact that, if all things go wrong today, at least there's tomorrow where I can get back on the microphone and try to do better. That's been a very interesting perspective because I think it's given me an extra layer of confidence around the fact that this isn't final, right? I don't have to wait a month to do this again. I get to do this tomorrow. I can do it whenever I want. So that has helped me tremendously as well. I'd say those are probably the biggest 2 lessons.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. And, you know, I've actually listened to episode 1 and 2 for me. And it was like, oh my gosh, that was horrible. I would never have listened to this. And it's really fun in a sense, because everybody says I have a really great radio voice. And I would have loved to have been a sportscaster or something like that. But the problem is very passionate about my team. And if they're not doing well, I may say a few swears here and there. That wouldn't be good on public TV and radio. So not good. I'd probably have to actually work for a team I hated, and that would be awful too. But, you know, it's funny. We do these podcasts and we get to meet a lot of people. And very interesting. I'm sure you've learned so much from the people that you've interviewed and stuff. I started out just doing a podcast by myself that I was just going to give content. And after episodes 1, I think I did about 5 or 6 episodes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot listen to myself talk anymore. And so somebody had said, you know, did you ever think of maybe bringing in some guests from now, you know, for a little bit? Then all of a sudden it just morphed into, you know, this is going to be my give back to entrepreneurs. So it's like, I'll just have different entrepreneurs come on, share about their business, share some, you know, strategies, and I'll be helping my audience. I'll be learning something, and it will be more interesting. I've never had a boring podcasts since then, maybe a few, but for the most part, they're good. It's really hard. There's some professions that are really hard to like really get passionate about, even though they're passionate about, but it works for everybody. So, we've made a lot, what is the one thing, as what it's like to have a job. I know what it's like to have a job. I'm so glad I don't have a job anymore.
Same.
But what is like the one thing you really enjoy about being in business for yourself and calling the shots?
Oh man, I think it's a double-edged sword. I like the amount of control I have over my schedule and the amount of impact I can have, but that's the other side of it too, right? Is there's nobody pushing me to do better. So it is that fine line of, I love the fact that I get to do what I want when I want, but I also have to understand that when I have an off day and I don't want to work, there is a lot of progress and momentum that's being lost. But I'm somebody who I like time freedom. So after I'm done after this is my last call of the day. I'll be done. And then tomorrow, my first call is, I think, at 10 a.m. Now, there's a lot that goes on between that. But yeah, I would say that the time freedom and the ability to say, hey, I'm going to Belgium in September. I'm going to be unavailable for any calls or any media appearances. And luckily, I get to make that rule. That's really good. It feels really good.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I used to work in a hospital, so I always had to put in for my weeks. And sometimes I didn't get my weeks. Yeah. It was all about seniority and, and I worked the night shift. So I had very few people to manipulate or even ask if they would switch with me, and give me that week off. So that's like the one thing I enjoy. We always see the glamour of it. We always see, like, everybody else sees that, but there's hard parts of it too. So like, what is the one thing that would you say is the hardest part about owning your own business?
Oh man. One, there are no hours. So even in that, right? Yeah, I'm done after this. I'm done in terms of being seen by humans, but I have WhatsApp messages to respond to. I have emails to respond to. So I would say the hardest thing is the pressure never goes away. I'm never going to be as quote unquote successful or as good as I want to be. So I'm always going to be trying to get a little bit better. And that pressure is going to remain forever. I think the other thing too is when you have a team, you get close to people. Right? You get close to the people that you're working with. And sometimes they want to go in other directions and they want to pursue other things. And when you've spent years with somebody, it can be sad to see people leave the team and go do their things. I want nothing but the best for them, but I definitely miss them. That's a hard part. There's a lot of people that start the journey with you that don't finish it with you. And that sucks sometimes. So yeah, there's a lot of emotions in the relationships that you have with the team as well. That's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that even in clients that I've had too, that, I've got attached to some and they move on because they're going in a different direction. Or in some cases, they decided that they're retiring and they no longer want to do business anymore, or it just didn't work out for them. And so for me, it's like, I feel the same way. You said something, that's kind of interesting. You said, about freedom, having your own hours, freedom. And what I've discovered, and I don't know if you've discovered this at all, but I tend to be a little bit disciplined just because if I just like did whatever I wanted to all the time, I'd probably not get anything done. So, and what I've realized over the past 3-4 years is that with every disciplined action that I take, such as maybe I block out some time that I'm going to work on a project for client fulfillment, or maybe I'm going to work on some graphics or whatever I'm going to be doing for my business. I realized that because I was able to get that done, that the freedom comes with it. I don't know if you've noticed that in your business or if it's something that's, a truth to you, is that really the freedom comes in with a little bit of discipline, the block time, or having a podcast schedule, or having, it's kind of funny because I'm one of these people, if there's a squirrel over there, squirrel, I'm going in that direction. Or maybe I watched too many TikTok videos today, or, whatever. And there's those times too. But I do realize that the more disciplined I am, the more work I get done and the more freedom I have. Yeah. Have you noticed that in your life? I am an uncomfortable amount of regimented in terms of
Monday from 10 in the morning till 6 p.m. we record. You can't book on my calendar. You can't get a hold of me. That it's there every week. So yeah, to your point, oftentimes what feels like it cages us actually unlocks us, because when you sit down and say, I'm going to spend the next 4 hours doing blank, you can get a lot done when you just sit down for 4 hours and focus on something that might create 4 hours later that you didn't realize you had. Usually that ends up getting filled with something for me. So it doesn't usually equate to freedom, but that's okay. But yeah, I would say there's something to the thought behind doing something that makes you feel caged often releases a ton of time later. It's a very weird concept, though. But yes.
Yeah, it is. I think about that a lot. I recently, and I think I shared with you when we were in the green room beforehand, but I was recently babysitting my grandson and realized I had less time. So I had less time, but I got more work done. And then I realized this, like, as I was thinking about this and talking it over, I have a coach, I have a business coach. And she said, so what can you do at home? Because what stops you from getting that much done when you're home? Because I'm home now. And it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. And it's like, so I tried, and then I realized all the distractions that come into my life because I work from home. So it's like, when I used to lease space before the pandemic and realized that I don't know why I was leasing space in the first place. I saved so much money, more money, and I didn't really need to have a space. But literally, I just realized that I have so many distractions that hit me during the day. So I'm trying to get into that. The idea is like, who wrote that book? Tim Ferriss, I think, the 4-hour work week.
Yep.
I would love that. I would love a 4-hour work week, but that means you have to be so productive in those hours and do all the right things.
Yeah. And for most people, you also have to be 15 years into the journey, because eventually it does get to the point where you only do the highest leverage things. But for a lot of people, there's a good book. I don't know if you've read it. It's called Indistractable by Nir Eyal. It's all about that and how your environment is so important for your success, and social media, how it drags you down the rabbit hole. We interviewed him a couple times. It's a really powerful book for staying focused and productivity.
I'll have to check it out. I read a book not too long ago called The Zone of Genius, and working in that zone of genius and then delegating everything else.
Yep.
And I think that, like, it really, when you're doing what you do best and you're delegating all the stuff that you can, such as podcast editing or scheduling. I mean, I don't even look at my email anymore. I hired an assistant in the beginning of 2022. She does all that for me. So it's like, I must save hours not looking or deleting emails and spam. So it's like, yay. But anyways, I was wondering, when you think about the people that are probably listening to this right now, if there was one piece of advice that you could give someone, and there's three types of listeners here. One are the startups. One are the people who are like the day-to-day grind of their business and they're feeling a little bit discouraged. And then there's those corporate people that I have some corporate people that are listening to this right now that may want to like morph over into owning their own business. So what would be the most important piece of advice that you could give?
It's probably going to be the opposite of what a lot of people would think. You have to understand what fills your cup, because you can do all the right things in business and get burnt out if you're doing all the wrong things in your personal life. So the only way to really win for most of us is to last as long or longer than everybody else. And the only real way to do that is to love what you do and make sure you're filling your cup when you're not doing it. So yeah, get wildly familiar with, is it walks in nature? Is it that type of stuff? And just as like to put a bow on it, oftentimes the stuff that doesn't quote unquote make us money is making us money indirectly. We just don't understand how it is. So if my wife and I go away for a weekend, it might seem like we're losing money, but we might actually be making money based on the fact that we're more fulfilled. Our relationship is going to improve. I'll be more productive. My cup will be filled. I think that's a very unique way to look at it that definitely has benefited me, understanding that sometimes the indirect ways to make money are just as powerful as the direct ways.
Absolutely. And, sometimes you really, to be more creative, more productive, more anything really, you really, number one, you do have to have a balanced life, but number two, you do have to walk away from it. Mm-hmm. I remember once I was trying to figure out something, why it wasn't working, and I just kept on going. Finally, I walked away, and not only did I walk away from it, but I gave it a day off, and then I came back to it and I figured it out right away. Sometimes you just need to get away. Yeah. And I, like my husband and I, we love to travel and we like to take breaks. So, I mean, I highly recommend those who are grinding it out every day, definitely take those breaks and do the things you love, the things that bring you joy.
Yeah. Whatever you're going to do, you got to do consistently. I think Absolutely. That's right. That's the thought. If you're going to grind, cool, you can grind, but make sure you're filling your cup. Because if you're not filling your cup, you're going to grind and you're never going to be fulfilled. And it's how do you do the right amount of work, the right amount of cup filling, the right amount of taking care of yourself, the right amount of time with your family. There's a very unique juggling act that has to happen.
Yeah. And something interesting, I usually don't talk about myself this much, but something I discovered recently, and you probably would agree with this, I realized I've been I usually have these extensive goals as a business owner for the year. And there's a lot of them, and extensive personal goals. I'm going to do this. I'm trained, right now I'm training for a 5K, which isn't a lot anymore, but it's about all I can do now at my age. And so basically I was discovering the sleep pattern I had and everything. And I realized how important sleep was. And that was my only goal. But what I realized, especially in the last couple months, is that I actually have a very high energetic time. And I wanted to make the most use of that. Some people call it a power hour. For me, it's about power 2.5 hours. But I realized it's that discovering little things about yourself that you didn't know. And another thing I would say is always just learning and growing. And I'm sure that, as you've morphed into this over 1,000 episodes in a podcast and doing your business and helping people and serving others, I'm sure there's tons of stuff you learned on the way. And you mentioned something about consistency, and everybody talks about consistency. In fact, but why do you think consistency is so important?
A couple of reasons. One, you really can't win without it unless you get lucky. And most of us aren't going to get lucky, right? You can either work at your dream every single day, or you can play the lottery and get lucky. The vast majority of us will never win the lottery. So part one is, if you want to pave a path to success, you have to be consistent. Here's the other thing. You just mentioned you've learned a lot over the journey. The reason you learn so much is when you show up every day, you get a lesson that you might not use for a year. I'm sure I learned stuff in the first year that I still haven't used. It just hasn't come up yet. This is always my analogy for consistency. If I sat down with you, Lorraine, and I said, I want to bet you $500 I can do the splits by this time next year, what is your next natural thought if you're betting money on that? I better start doing that every single day. And if I don't do it every day and I take a day off here and there, the likelihood of me accomplishing that goal goes down. If I only do it once a week, that's only 52 opportunities for me to practice the splits. It's probably not enough. The reason most of us aren't as successful as we want to be is because we're not doing the right things as consistently as we need to be. And that just is an unfortunate thing for a lot of us, because I know being consistent is challenging, and there's a lot that goes into that. But yeah, I think a lot of people have been misled, where people talk about, you can work less and make more. Sure, at some point in your business you can, but when you're building a business, you have to be consistent, because that's how you're going to show up, and that's how you're going to get your name known.
Absolutely. I always tell people it really is a lot of hard work. If I look way back to when I first started and where I am now, totally different. So I just want to thank you for being a guest on my podcast. And I'm sure there's some people who resonated with you out there. Is there anything that you want to offer or share, or something that, you'd like your audience to have? Just let me know.
But yeah, I always just tell people to listen to the podcast. It's free. I don't want your money. It's every day. So it's an opportunity to get a little bit better every day. Just search Next Level University and you'll find us.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll put that on, and I hope you get some more listeners.
Thank you.
And again, thank you. And everyone out there, I'm so glad you're listening to my podcast, and I will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social podcast. Find us on Instagram at Biz Gone Social for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.